Hello, my name's Marjorie, and I was the daughter they forgot. Not once, not by accident, but on purpose. My mom told me she was too weak to visit me after tumor surgery. She said she needed rest, quiet, recovery time. But while I lay in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, she was clinking glasses with my sister at a luxury spa, brunch, facials, and a weekend getaway I paid for. Without knowing, I cut them off. Within 24 hours, my phone lit up with 83 missed calls, but none when I needed them most. Why does it take silence for people to finally hear you? And when they do, is it ever too late? I opened my banking app and hovered over the Recurring Transfers tab. The number stared back at me like it had for the past 4 years, $1,200. Automatically sent to my mother's account on the 5th of every month. Rent, groceries, a little help. That's what she called it, every time I'd asked where the money went. I never pressed. I told myself dignity meant trusting the people you love. That was before I watched her clink mimosa glasses with my sister while I was still hooked up to an IV, my neck stiff, my lips dry, my mouth stitched silent. I stared at the transfer line for a long time before my thumb moved. Disable. Confirm. The app asked me if I was sure. I laughed. It sounded sharp, brittle, not at all like me. I pressed yes. Friday morning had started so differently. The rain had been gentle, more mist than drizzle, the kind that makes Seattle feel like a watercolor painting. My hospital room window was fogged, but I'd drawn a little heart on the glass with my fingertip. Childish maybe, but it comforted me. I'd called Mom just before the nurse came to prep me. She picked up on the third ring. "I was about to call you," she said, her voice too loud, tinny on speaker. "But my neck's acting up again. I slept wrong, I think." I remember pausing, unsure what to say. "It's okay." "I just wanted to hear your voice." "Oh, sweetheart, you know I hate hospitals, and with traffic and everything, I'd probably just be in the way." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Sure, I get it." "You're strong," she added quickly. "You've always been the strong one." She hung up soon after, said she had an appointment. I lay there, alone, gown rustling beneath me, fingers cold despite the blankets. They wheeled me into surgery without a hand to squeeze. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia hit was the overhead light. A cold circle, almost theatrical. When I woke up, it was dark outside. My throat felt raw. A nurse leaned over me, soft smile, her name badge reading, "Maria." "You're out of the woods, hun." "Everything went well." I asked if anyone had called. She shook her head gently. "Your chart says you're self-released. No one listed for pickup." I nodded again. My heart didn't sink. It didn't even flinch. On day 2, I propped myself up in bed, my back against the stiff hospital pillow. My phone had been charging on the tray. I tapped it awake, needing distraction. Instagram opened without thinking. The algorithm knew me too well. The second story at the top of my screen was Celine's. Her voice over the video was cheery. "Morning at Tranquil Pines, self-care weekend with Mom." There they were, bathrobes, slippers, matching spa towels, champagne flutes. My mother's arm draped lovingly around Celine's shoulder. The caption read, "Mother-daughter, weekend hatch wellness escape." I stared at the timestamp, 10:14 a.m. I'd still been under. For a moment, my hand froze, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I scrolled forward. More photos. Buffet brunch, a poolside shot, Darlene floating in a sun hat, Celine holding up a green smoothie, my mother laughing with her mouth open wide, teeth showing, eyes crinkled, joyful, radiant, not tired, not in pain, not too overwhelmed to drive. And the morphine dulled my thoughts, but not enough. A familiar tightness gathered in my chest, not grief, not anger, something quieter. I'd always known the difference deep down. The difference between how she loved Celine and how she tolerated me. I closed the app. The next morning, discharge paperwork was dropped off at 9 a.m. I signed without reading. The nurse asked if anyone was coming. "No," I said. "I'll call a car." It took longer than expected to get dressed. My hands weren't steady, and every movement pulled at the stitches. I left the hospital in the same clothes I'd arrived in, leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, the same ones I'd worn when I hugged my mother goodbye 3 days earlier. She hadn't looked up from her phone. Outside, the Seattle sky was pewter gray. A rideshare driver arrived 15 minutes later, cheerful, oblivious. "Rough day?" he asked as I buckled in. I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just ready to go home." On the ride back, I stared out the window while buildings blurred past. My phone buzzed with notifications. Nothing from family, just work emails, newsletters, a coupon for vitamins. I opened WhatsApp. The family group chat had a new photo, Celine and Mom standing beneath a Relax Renew banner. No mention of my surgery, no get well soon. I left the group without warning, just hit the exit button. The app asked if I was sure. Again, I laughed. Again, I said yes. At home, I dropped my bag just inside the door, sat on the edge of my couch, and stayed there. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that made you aware of your heartbeat, the fridge's hum, the occasional car rolling by outside. I lay back slowly, careful not to tug at my side, and pulled a throw blanket over my legs. I typed a message to Mom. I hope the spa was worth missing my surgery. I hope Celine made it worth it. I stared at the screen for a long time, the blinking cursor like a metronome. Then I hit backspace, slowly, letter by letter. Eventually, I deleted the whole thing. Then, I opened my banking app. Disable. Confirm. Not because I was angry, not even because I was hurt, because I was finally done pretending. I opened the folder labeled Family Receipts and saw the date that broke me. It was printed in black ink, dead center at the top of a credit card statement. Saturday, 10:17 a.m., just 3 minutes after I went under anesthesia. The transaction read, Tranquil Pines Resort Spa, brunch and mimosa pairing, $162. Not the emergency copay she'd told me she needed help covering. Not the physical therapy bill she guilted me into paying 2 weeks ago. Not groceries. Not utilities. Not a little something to keep things afloat. Brunch. Berries soaked in champagne. Eggs. Benedict with truffle hollandaise. Whatever they'd posted in that damn Instagram story. I stared at the statement a little longer before flipping through the rest of the folder. I hadn't looked at these papers in over a year, not since I'd tried to talk myself out of needing proof. The envelopes were arranged by month, each one marked with my handwriting. April, March, February. I stopped at December and pulled the paper from the sleeve. There it was again. Tranquil Pines. Twice. I reached across the table for a yellow highlighter and circled both entries. Then I turned the page. Over the next 2 hours, I highlighted 10 more. Each one was a moment she told me she couldn't afford a taxi. Each one was a weekend Celine posted, "Family is everything," while I was on another Zoom meeting, working overtime to make sure Mom's account was funded on time. Outside my window, the rain had returned. Heavier now, rhythmic. I didn't turn on music or the TV. I let the quiet stretch around me, fill in all the places I used to bend, just to make things easier, just to keep the peace. The irony hit hard. I'd spent most of my adult life trying not to be a burden. Meanwhile, I was the only one carrying weight. At 3:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't check it immediately. I was still sorting receipts into labeled piles. Health, housing, spa, lies. It buzzed again, and again. By the time I reached for it, there were 5 missed calls. 1 from home, 2 from Mom, 2 from Celine. I didn't answer. I watched the screen light up and dim, like a heartbeat I no longer needed to monitor. By dinner, the count had reached 23. I placed the phone face down on the table and picked up the receipt for a massage dated 2 days after my last promotion. That was the week Mom had called sobbing about a gas leak, saying she might have to stay at a motel. Turns out she had, but not alone. And not because of gas. At 8:42 p.m., a voicemail came through. I didn't press play. I knew how it would go. "Sweetheart, we're so worried about you. You don't have to be like this." Celine is beside herself. I let them stack, like layers of a cake I never wanted a slice of. By the time I woke up the next morning, the call log had climbed to 83. That included 4 from the landline we used to call the red phone as kids, because it always meant business. Dad's voice on the answering machine, Mom's updates, late bills, birthday reminders, hospital news. That phone hadn't rung in years, and now it was trying to pull me back like a rope tied to guilt. I made coffee the slow way, French press, extra dark. While it steeped, I opened the fridge and realized I'd forgotten to buy creamer. I used oat milk instead. It tasted fine. Different, but fine. Around 9 o'clock a.m., just as I was settling into my chair by the window, a knock echoed through the apartment. My pulse didn't spike. I didn't move right away. The knock came again, sharper this time. Not angry, just certain. I walked quietly to the door and peeked through the peephole. Celine, hairstyled, lipstick applied, a latte in her hand. She wore a beige trench coat, the kind that always made her look like she belonged in a lifestyle magazine. Her expression was tight, rehearsed. She knew she'd be seen. I didn't open the door. She waited a moment longer, then placed the coffee cup on the floor. Slowly, deliberately. I stood there, watching. She didn't say anything, just turned and walked away, heels clicking against the hallway tile like punctuation marks. When I was sure she was gone, I picked up the cup. It was still warm. I didn't drink it. I placed it on the kitchen counter, still untouched, and returned to the folder. I slid out a final envelope. No label. Inside was a handwritten list. A budget Mom had given me 5 years ago. Rent, electric, groceries, cell phone. The total, $1,185. She'd rounded it to $200, told me it made things easier. And every month I'd sent it, without question, without fail. I pulled out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet, started entering the numbers, not for them, for me. An hour passed, maybe 2. The rain had lightened. A faint bit of sun pushed through the clouds like it was trying, but not too hard. I closed the spreadsheet and saved it under a new name. Family Receipts. Final. I sat back, stretching slightly, feeling the pull near my incision, but no longer wincing. This was clarity. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was numbers. Facts. Truth. Around noon, I checked my email. Nothing urgent. A few sales. A message from HR about open enrollment. Then a subject line caught my eye. We need to talk. Mom is spiraling. From Celine. I clicked it open. Marjorie, please don't ignore this. She's not sleeping. She's making calls all over the family, telling people you've abandoned her, that you're acting out, that maybe you're unstable. I'm not saying I agree. I just think we should clear this up before it gets worse. Can we meet? Just talk? Celine. I stared at the screen for a while, not blinking. Acting out, unstable, classic projection. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the benefits portal for my employer and pulled up the dependent list. 2 names. Me. Mom. I clicked Remove Dependent. A pop-up appeared, asking for confirmation. Reason for removal? I selected No longer qualifies. I pressed Submit. And just like that, my mother's name disappeared from my healthcare coverage. There was no sound, no explosion, no gasp, just space. And in that space, I felt something new settle in. Not revenge, not satisfaction, freedom. I didn't flinch when I hit send. There was no dramatic music, no thunderclap, just the soft hum of my laptop, the clink of my coffee mug as I set it aside. The screenshots I'd attached, 3 of them, were clear, time-stamped, and undeniable. One showed the spa payment from the day of my surgery. The second captured the invoice I'd received from her 2 days later, claiming she'd spent all her money on gas and groceries. The third was a WhatsApp message from Celine, asking me to cover Mom's phone bill again because she's been too stressed to deal with it. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled through my nose. Not relief, not rage, just emptiness. There was nothing left to explain. I hadn't spoken to either of them in 3 full days, and not once had they asked how the surgery went. Not once had anyone said, "How are you healing?" Instead, Celine had left coffee at my door like I was a wild animal to be coaxed out. And now, undoubtedly, the screenshots would set off a chain reaction I couldn't stop, but wouldn't apologize for either. I checked the time. 6:42 p.m. I hadn't eaten since noon. My stomach wasn't exactly complaining, but I figured I should eat before the nausea that had nothing to do with anesthesia crept back in. I grabbed a container of leftover lentil stew from the fridge and heated it on the stovetop. While it simmered, I grabbed the stack of envelopes I'd set aside earlier and brought them to the table. This was the part that used to unravel me, the part where I'd lay out the facts, the paper trail, and still end up the villain. Because nice girls don't keep records, nice girls forgive, nice girls let it go. But I wasn't interested in being the nice girl anymore. I sorted the envelopes by year: 2018, 2019, 2020. Each one stuffed with bank transfers, emails, thank you cards from my mother that never actually said thank you, just implied I'd done my duty. I opened the envelope marked 2018 and pulled out a receipt dated November 21st, the week of Thanksgiving. The memory came back before I could push it away. I was in the kitchen of Mom's house, up to my elbows in pumpkin puree. Celine breezed in with a designer tote and nothing else. No dish, no drink, no offer to help. She hugged Mom tightly and began chattering about her latest skincare launch. I kept stirring. 2 hours later, I sliced my finger trying to open a can of evaporated milk. It wasn't serious, but it bled enough to need bandaging. I came back into the living room with a paper towel wrapped around my hand. "Oh, honey, don't be so dramatic," Mom said, waving me off. "It's not like you lost a limb." Celine laughed. I forced a smile and went back to the kitchen. That night, while doing dishes alone, I overheard Mom telling Celine, "You always bring such light into the house. Marjorie, well, she tries, I guess." Back at my dining table, I carefully placed the receipt back in the envelope, then opened the one marked 2020. Christmas. COVID. I followed the rules. Stayed home, ordered groceries to her house, video called during dinner. Celine, meanwhile, flew in, posted selfies with a Santa hat and Mom's dog. When I asked Mom why she let her come, she said, "Celine's just different. She makes the effort." I made the effort too, just not the kind that got likes and comments. Another receipt, December 23rd. A boutique clothing store in Bellevue. Total, $412.54. The next morning, Celine had posted a story captioned, "Spoiled by Santa, aka Mom." I didn't reply. Just watched the view count rise, saw Mom's name in the liked by list. I closed the envelope and stood up. My legs ached from sitting too long. I walked to the sink, rinsed my dish, and wiped the counter slowly, deliberately. Every motion felt like part of a ritual I hadn't known I needed. By the time I sat back down, the sun had fully set. My apartment was dark, except for the lamp by my chair and the glow of my laptop screen. I selected all the scanned receipts and uploaded them into a private Google Drive folder. Then, just as calmly, I wrote the email subject line, "Family Expense Archive," for legal reference. I didn't plan to send it yet, but it was ready, just in case. Around 9:15 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Mom. "We're still family. You don't walk away from blood." I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the screen. My heart didn't race, my jaw didn't clench. I typed back, "You walked first. I just opened the door wider." And then, because I'd already done the work, I attached the 3 screenshots I'd sent earlier, this time directly to her. I didn't wait for a reply. I plugged in my phone across the room and went to brush my teeth. By the time I returned to the living room, a reply was already waiting. "I didn't raise you to be spiteful." I whispered into the quiet, "You didn't raise me at all." I turned off the lamp, leaving only the hallway light on, casting long shadows across the receipts still fanned out on the table. I thought about leaving them out overnight, like offerings to a god I'd finally stopped worshipping. But instead, I slid them all into a file folder and locked them in the cabinet. Not out of fear, out of order. Because nice girls don't keep records. But smart women, we keep everything. The email went out with a single sentence. Meeting confirmed. But I won't be the only one bringing evidence. I shut my laptop and sat still, staring at the glow of the screen as it faded to black. The apartment around me was silent again. Not peaceful, never quite peaceful, but heavy with the kind of stillness that follows a storm when the air is thick and waiting. I didn't sleep much that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I laid on the couch, flipping through pages of an old planner from 2017. Every page was filled with reminders, wire transfer dates, mom's appointments I'd scheduled, groceries I'd had delivered to her door. Nothing about me. Not one page said, "Rest today." Not one said, "You're tired too." By 7 a.m., I was already up, showered, dressed in a charcoal blazer I hadn't worn since my last in-person quarterly review. I pulled my hair back into a low bun, the way I used to before I started working remotely full-time. No makeup, just clean skin and sharp eyes. I walked downstairs to the leasing office and asked to reserve the conference room for noon. "Family meeting," I told the receptionist when she asked. "Sounds serious," she said, handing me the access fob. "It's overdue." Back upstairs, I made tea and went over my notes again. It wasn't a presentation. I wasn't going to stand behind a podium with a slideshow, but I did want to be precise. Clear, not angry, not accusatory, just factual. At 11:45, I loaded my folder into a leather tote, the kind my mother used to call too masculine when I brought it to family dinners. "A purse should have some softness," she'd said once, while holding up one of Celine's designer bags. "Yours looks like a briefcase." Maybe that was the point. I arrived early and set the room up with 3 chairs on one side of the long table and 1 chair on the other. No coffee, no pastries. This wasn't brunch. At 11:59, I heard heels in the hallway. Celine entered first, dressed like she was headed to a photo shoot. Silky blouse, high-waisted slacks, a perfect nude lip. Behind her, my mother wore a camel-colored coat and a scarf she'd dramatically pulled close around her shoulders like she'd stepped into a courtroom. "Good to see you," Celine said cautiously. "Let's sit." They did. I didn't offer small talk. Mom leaned forward slightly. "We're not here to fight. We're here because we still love you. Your family, Marjorie." "Family," I repeated softly, opening the folder. I pulled out the first document and slid it across the table. "This is from my insurance provider. As of 2 days ago, you're no longer listed as a dependent." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't just drop your mother like a client." "You were never a client," I said. "You were my responsibility until you made it clear I was optional." She scoffed. "You're being dramatic. Celine had appendicitis and didn't make it all about herself." The room went quiet. I didn't look at Celine. I kept my eyes on my mother. "I had a tumor," I said, my voice calm. "A real one. Inside my body. You skipped the surgery to get a facial." "I didn't know it would upset you so much," she blurted out. "I thought you'd understand. You're the strong one." I nodded. "That line has expired. Along with my coverage of your expenses." Celine shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "We all have ways of coping. This is just a misunderstanding that got out of hand." I reached for the second document. "This is a copy of my updated emergency contacts. You've been removed. My attorney's name is now on file. If anything happens to me, you won't be called." "Don't do this," Mom said. Her voice dropped, not soft, but heavy. Manipulative. "You'll regret this when I'm gone." "I've regretted plenty already." Celine leaned forward, hands clasped like she was in a therapy session. "You've always been kind of distant, Marjorie. You don't make it easy to include you." That was the spark. The exact one. I stood up, reached into the tote, and laid out a row of screenshots like tarot cards. One showed Mom's text saying she was too weak to drive. The second, a time-stamped story from Celine's Instagram at the spa that same hour. The third, the bank charge for the resort brunch, with the same funds I'd sent for medication. I said nothing. Let them both read. When Mom looked up, she didn't look ashamed. She looked cornered. You keep records now. What kind of daughter does that? I shrugged. The kind who stopped asking for permission. Celine's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the papers again, then at me. You've been planning this. No, I've been surviving this. Mom pushed back her chair, stood up, wrapped her coat tighter. If you're going to keep throwing accusations, then this conversation is over. I agree, I said. But before you go, one last thing. I took out my phone and opened the public Instagram post Celine had shared earlier that week, an elegant quote graphic that read, "Some people don't understand loyalty until it's gone." I read it aloud, then opened the comments section and read my reply. Loyalty isn't the same as enabling. You humiliated me, Celine said. No. You did that when you tagged Mom in a spa story while I was under anesthesia. There was no yelling, no tears, just silence. Cold, clean silence. They left without another word. I waited until the sound of the elevator had faded before gathering my papers. Back upstairs, I slid everything back into the drawer. Not hidden, just filed. At 5:18 p.m., I received a text. Family meeting. Friday. Don't make us come to you. I stared at it for a moment, then replied, meeting confirmed. But I won't be the only one bringing evidence. After they left the building, I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there in the conference room, staring at the door that had closed behind them like a gavel coming down at the end of a trial. My hands were still resting on the back of the chair I hadn't sat in, fingers curled tight, not in anger, but in finality. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It wasn't satisfying either. It was sobering, like walking out of a courtroom, not because you won, but because you finally stopped defending a case that never should have gone to trial in the first place. I packed up my folder, slowly, every paper back into its sleeve, every receipt laid flat like it still had something to say. Before leaving the room, I reached for the light switch. The moment the fluorescence clicked off, I stood there in the dim glow from the hallway and thought, so that's what it feels like to stop pretending. I didn't go straight back upstairs. I stepped outside instead, let the late afternoon air hit my skin. The breeze wasn't sharp, but it carried the kind of chill that made you question whether it was still fall or if winter had crept in early. I walked around the block once, needing time to let my body catch up to what my brain had already decided. When I returned to my apartment, there was an email waiting. Subject line, something I never told you. It was from Celine. I hesitated before opening it, sat down on the edge of the couch, kicked off my shoes. I didn't want to get sucked into more apologies that didn't really mean anything. But something about the way she'd phrased it, like a confession instead of a demand, made me click. Marjorie, I don't know what you want from me. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's too late. But there's something I should have told you years ago, and I didn't, because I didn't want to mess up what I had with Mom. She always said you were too serious, too intense, too emotional. She'd roll her eyes whenever you left the room, and I let her. I laughed along sometimes, not because I believed her, but because it was easier. I was the one who got the birthday posts, the matching robes, the "You're my world" captions, but I also got the weight of keeping the peace, of making sure Mom didn't spiral. I know that doesn't excuse it. I'm not writing this to fix things. I'm writing this so, you know, you weren't crazy. You saw it. I just pretended not to. Celine. I read it twice. The second time slower. She hadn't said sorry, not directly, but she'd said the part that mattered. You weren't crazy. My throat felt tight, but I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt validated. In a quiet, tired way that didn't need applause. I replied with a single line, "You knew, and now I know you did." That's enough for me. I didn't expect her to respond. I just needed to say it. Later that night, around 8:30, I was reheating leftover pasta when another message came through, this time from Mom. It was a voice message, not a call, just one of those audio clips she'd taken to sending ever since she discovered you could talk without actually dialing. I pressed play. Her voice was calm, almost syrupy. Well, it's done, I guess. You've turned everyone against me. I'm sure you feel real proud, but I hope when you're my age, alone, with no one to call, you remember this. You'll remember what you did to your mother. That's all I wanted to say. No mention of the spa. No acknowledgement of the receipts. No recognition of the meeting that just took place. Just the usual. You made me the victim. I deleted the message without saving it. Then, as if my phone were cursed, another notification came through. A tag. Celine had posted a black and white graphic to her Instagram story, the kind with a curly font over a neutral background. Some people don't understand loyalty until it's gone. Classic. I tapped reply, typed 3 words, paused, then erased them. I pulled up her profile and saw dozens of people commenting with heart emojis and stay strong messages. I knew where this was headed, the passive-aggressive sympathy train, so I posted something of my own, just a blank white square with the words, "Loyalty isn't the same as silence." I left it up without a caption, no comments allowed. Within the hour, I got a text from Celine. "You didn't have to go public." I replied, "Neither did you." "But you did. And now you're surprised I spoke back." She didn't answer. The next day, I went for a walk around Green Lake. The trees were halfway bare now, the path littered with fallen leaves, all in varying shades of rust and gold. It reminded me of a family trip we'd taken years ago. Mom had made Celine and me pose for 20 minutes to get the perfect picture. I was 12. Celine was 15. She got to hold the dog. I got to hold the coats. At the time, I didn't even question it, just assumed that was how it worked. After the walk, I stopped by a coffee shop near the lake and ordered a chai latte. The barista smiled, said my name looked familiar. I said maybe she'd seen my email in the customer feedback system. I didn't say anything about the post. I didn't need to. That evening, while folding laundry on the couch, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a screenshot someone had forwarded from a private Facebook group. "Marjorie Huxley needs help. Her mother is devastated. Let's surround Darlene with love." The comments that followed were full of sympathy for Mom. She gave so much to her kids. She's always been such a light. I can't believe Marjorie would treat her like this. I didn't bother defending myself. People believe what they want, and some people, especially the ones who've never seen the fine print, will always side with the one who cries the loudest. I opened my calendar app and created a new folder. Personal evidence. Then I added the voice message, the Facebook screenshot, the Instagram post, not for revenge, for the record. Because when people like my mother rewrite the narrative, they don't use facts, they use volume. And this time, I had the receipts. I clicked send on the email with the subject line, "Regarding Darlene Kirsch," and let my hand fall into my lap. There was no tremor in my fingers, no shaking in my chest. What I felt was quiet. Stillness, almost sacred, like the sound after a long-held breath is finally released. The email wasn't long. I didn't rehash every offense or explain how I'd reached this point. I didn't need to. It simply attached a few key documents: medical billing statements, bank records, and the health insurance changes I'd submitted 2 weeks ago. The email body read, "I believe the attached files will clarify the inconsistencies in the financial support history. I am happy to speak further if required." I signed it, then closed my laptop. Saturday morning had arrived like any other, overcast, slow, damp with Seattle drizzle. I'd made tea, fed the cat, sorted laundry. It was mundane. That was the most remarkable thing about this day. It didn't feel dramatic. It didn't need to. By noon, I had folded the laundry and was halfway through a podcast when another notification pinged. A new message from Celine. No greeting, no emojis. Just, "Can I tell you something I never told anyone?" That was it. I didn't reply. I stared at it for almost an hour, letting my mind try to guess what came next. Part of me braced for manipulation. Another part of me, a smaller, rusted part, hoped it might actually be something honest. At 1:30 p.m., another message appeared. A full email this time. "Marjorie, I used to think Mom loved us both the same, just differently." That's what I told myself. It was easier. I think I knew, deep down, she didn't protect you the way she protected me. I think she needed me to be the one who stayed close so she could spin the story how she wanted. She always said you were hard to love, said you made her feel judged, that you carried too much edge. I didn't defend you. I let her talk about you like that. And then I took the praise she gave me, knowing it came at your expense. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you that you weren't imagining it. Celine. I reread it 3 times. I didn't cry, not the way I thought I might. The tears had already come days ago, curled into a hospital bed, scrolling through spa photos while anesthesia still lingered in my veins. No, what I felt now was something cleaner, like someone finally pointed to the thing that had been sitting in the corner of the room all along and said, "Yes, that's real." I closed the message and stood by the window for a while, watching cars move along the street like ants with places to be. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure I needed to. Instead, I went online. There was a Facebook group, private, family only. Darlene ran it. The Kirsch Family Tree, a place where she posted birthdays, old photos, and glowing tributes to Celine's achievements. I was in it, technically, but I'd never seen a single post about me. I scrolled through the timeline until I found the most recent cover photo, Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Mom and Celine in matching aprons standing behind a perfectly roasted turkey. Caption: couldn't have done it without my girl. There was no mention of who made the cranberry sauce, or who paid for the groceries. I wasn't even in the frame, not cropped, not blurred, just never invited. I shut the browser and opened my own Instagram, scrolled back until I found a photo from my 8th grade science fair. Me, glasses too big, holding a blue ribbon in front of a trifold board covered in data points. I posted it with one sentence. The day I learned silence wasn't golden, it was expected. Within minutes, comments rolled in. A former teacher: "You were brilliant even then. So proud of you." A coworker: "This explains so much. Thank you for sharing." Even someone I hadn't spoken to since college messaged, "Your story makes more sense now. I see you." At 5:45 p.m., I received another ping. This one was public. Darlene had posted a quote graphic, cream background, scripted font. "Some daughters never learn gratitude, but I pray for them anyway." A passive-aggressive prayer. Classic. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. But Celine did. Under the quote, she commented, "Let's stop pretending this is about prayer." No one liked her comment. No one replied. But it was there, like a crack in the surface. I didn't feel victorious, just validated. That night, as I closed up for bed, I logged into my personal files and opened the document titled Medical Fraud Notes. It had sat untouched for weeks, compiled only as a backup in case I needed leverage. I read it again, cross-checked a few statements. Then, slowly, I opened my email client and began typing. To Legal Counsel. Subject: regarding Darlene Kirsch. I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't care if it ended in court or not. I wasn't interested in punishment. I was interested in proof. I wrote the first line, then the second. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicked. This was me, documenting. This was me, protecting myself. Because being the unfavorite didn't make me weak. It made me observant, and observant girls keep everything. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight, but in meaning. I closed the door behind me, turned the deadbolt, and walked slowly to the kitchen counter with it in my hands. The paper was torn at the edge, like someone had ripped it open in a rush. The handwriting on the outside was unmistakable. Hers, Darlene Kirsch, my mother. The woman who had once tucked notes into my lunchbox and now left threats veiled in prayers online. But this note wasn't her usual script of guilt. This was something different, something she didn't want the world to see. I unfolded the page. If anything happens to me, don't let her bury it. No greeting, no signature, just that sentence. It was vague enough to dismiss, but pointed enough to chill me, the kind of message that carried weight not because of what it said, but because of who it came from, and who it was clearly about. I set it down, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned on the counter. Celine had left this here, or maybe she'd just delivered it. Either way, she'd shown up with no makeup, red eyes, and a voice that sounded more like a whisper than a person. She hadn't asked to come in. She hadn't pushed back when I said, "I'm not sorry." She'd only said, "I think you should see what she left at your door." That sentence had sat with me for hours. Now the note sat beside my keyboard as I opened my email again. I clicked the thread I'd started with my attorney. Attaching a scanned note found at my residence. Possible relevance to ongoing issues with healthcare fraud investigation and inheritance matters. I hit send. Later that evening, the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting long shadows across the living room. The light filtered through the blinds in slanted lines, and I sat on the floor surrounded by folders. I hadn't touched some of them in years. They were the kind of documents people don't usually save: school awards, bank statements, postcards from relatives who never visited. But I saved everything. That's what you do when no one remembers the truth but you. Around 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. I reached for it slowly, half expecting another text from Celine. Instead, it was a voicemail alert. No missed call, just a message. I pressed play. It was Mom's voice, shaky, agitated. She thinks she's so smart, doesn't she? Let her burn the whole thing down if she wants. She's always been the dramatic one. If she wants to stand in the ashes, fine. Just don't expect me to rescue her this time. The recording ended. There was a pause. Then another voice came on, much softer. "She'll hear this, you know," Celine said. "You're recording, Mom." Silence. Then the call cut off. It had been meant for someone else. Sent to me by mistake. I didn't flinch. I didn't delete it, either. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer with a short note. Additional relevant audio, time-stamped. 10 minutes later, he replied, "Understood. I'll bring this to the investigator's attention. We may need you to confirm dependent removal status and statements under oath." I typed back, "Already prepared. Documents in order. May I call Monday to schedule?" His answer came within the hour. "Yes, I'll have my assistant reach out." I stared at the ceiling after that, back pressed against the hardwood, folders around me like a battlefield. The silence didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt deserved. By the next morning, the state investigator called. "Ms. Huxley, this is Craig Atwood with the Department of Health Services." "Yes, I'm here," I said calmly, even though I hadn't had coffee yet. "We're looking into some flagged reimbursements on your mother's account, tied to your health policy. We just need to verify, was she still covered as a dependent after May 3rd of this year?" "No," I answered. "She was removed on May 3rd. I have the documentation. I also did not authorize any retroactive claims." "Perfect," he said. "If you can send those to this email, I'll file the statement this week." I sent the documents within the hour. By Sunday night, word had gotten around. It always does in families like mine, ones that worship image and burn truth like incense. My cousin Tara texted first. "Hey, just heard about what's going on with your mom. You okay?" I didn't reply. An hour later, Aunt Diane messaged, "Sweetheart, I don't know all the details, but I'm sure we can work this out as a family. Your mother's in pieces." I responded, "She wasn't in pieces when I was in the hospital." Celine texted in all caps, "Why did you do this?" I wrote back without hesitation. "You don't understand the cost of loyalty until you've paid it in full." That was the end of it, for that day anyway. Until 10:11 p.m. when my intercom buzzed, I was already in bed, glasses off, reading a novel I couldn't seem to focus on. I walked to the door in my robe and looked through the screen. Celine, again. This time, no trench coat, no perfect makeup, just sweatpants, hoodie, and eyes that looked like she hadn't slept since Friday. I pressed the speaker button. "I told the truth," I said. "I'm not sorry." She didn't react, just stood there holding something in her hand. Then she said quietly, "I think you should see what she left at your door." I blinked, my heart slowing down in confusion. "She who?" "She left it with me. I wasn't going to give it to you, but now, you should read it." I didn't answer. She placed the envelope on the welcome mat, took a step back, and left without another word. I waited a minute, then another. Then I opened the door. The envelope was already damp around the edges from the light drizzle. Torn on one side, the handwriting was tight, slanted, familiar. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No greeting, no apology. Just 7 words. "If anything happens to me, don't let her bury it." I turned the paper over in my hands and wondered, what exactly had she been trying to keep buried? It was just past 9 o'clock p.m., and the apartment had gone still. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant hush of Seattle traffic through the windows. I stood frozen in the entryway, one hand still clutching the door handle as the other held the wrinkled sheet of paper. The ink was faded but legible. The handwriting belonged to my grandmother, a woman who had died nearly a decade ago, a woman who never raised her voice, but also never got in my mother's way. If anything happens to me, don't let her bury it. The meaning was vague, but my gut knew better than to dismiss it. Whatever it was, my mother didn't want it seen. I carried the note over to my desk and laid it down gently beside my laptop. Then, still barefoot, I walked to the bookshelf in the hallway closet. I kept an old accordion file in the back, one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were scraps of the family I'd chosen to forget. Wills, letters, cards, even old photos I didn't have the heart to destroy. I flipped through them carefully, like leafing through a fragile kind of grief. And then I found it. A sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. My grandmother's name written in cursive. Inside was a letter, not addressed to me, addressed to my father. The man who vanished when I was 10. The man who'd left with a promise to stay in touch, but never did. I unfolded the letter and sat down slowly, my legs too shaky to keep standing. It was dated July 3rd, 1998. My grandmother wrote, "Michael, I know you've done your best to keep peace, but Darlene is rewriting too much. She's shaping those girls into roles they didn't choose. Marjorie is not difficult. She's aware. That scares Darlene. Celine is not the favorite because she earned it. She's just easier to mold. If you ever want to make this right, you have to stop pretending you're powerless. If anything happens to me, don't let her bury this truth." I exhaled slowly, the edges of the paper trembling in my grip. It wasn't proof of a crime, but it was proof of a pattern, proof that someone else saw it, named it, and now I wasn't the only one carrying it. The next morning, I called my lawyer and finalized the affidavit to legally sever all remaining ties with my mother. It took just under an hour. A notary came to the office. I signed the paperwork and slid the envelope across the table. "This is the last paper she'll ever sign with my name on it," I said. The lawyer nodded, didn't ask for context. He didn't need it. My voice said enough. When I returned home, I made tea and sat down to write. Not an email, not another legal brief, but an essay. I opened Medium and clicked New Story. Title, "When You're the Unchosen Daughter." I started with the spa story, how I woke up from surgery to find out my mother had gone for a facial instead of holding my hand. I wrote about growing up in a house where attention was rationed, not given, where praise was conditional and silence was currency. I talked about being the strong one, the one who never needed help, the one who always showed up, paid the bills, held her tongue. I didn't name names, but I didn't have to. By the time I hit publish, my hands were steady. My chest didn't feel heavy. My eyes didn't sting, just clear, clean, truthful. By lunch, the essay had been read over 12,000 times. By 3 o'clock p.m., it was trending on the front page. Emails flooded in, messages from women I'd never met, therapists, writers, daughters. I thought I was alone. This made me cry in the break room. Finally, someone said it out loud. A stranger forwarded me a thread where my story was being discussed on a parenting forum. One user wrote, "This is why some of us don't talk to our kids anymore. They think we're villains because we didn't coddle them." Another replied, "Or maybe they finally stopped mistaking neglect for discipline." I didn't engage. I just let it live. Around 5 o'clock p.m., the public fallout began. One of Mom's oldest friends posted a vague status about ungrateful children with internet access. Within minutes, someone else replied, "If the shoe fits." A colleague of Mom's from her real estate office commented under my essay, "I always wondered why she only ever talked about one daughter." By dinner, Celine's Instagram account had disappeared. No posts, no comments, no profile. She'd gone dark, and I didn't feel smug about it. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just existed. Alone. But honest, that night I sat by the window with a cup of tea, legs tucked under me, the city stretched out below, lights flickering in quiet rhythms. My phone buzzed once, unknown number. I hesitated, then tapped play on the voicemail. A male voice, gravelly. Careful. I read your essay. I don't know if I can fix anything, but I believe you. I'm sorry. There was a pause. Then, it's Dad. I sat still for a full minute, tea cooling in my hand. I hadn't heard his voice in 25 years, hadn't seen his face since the day he kissed my forehead and told me he'd be back before summer ends. He never came back, never called, until now. I turned my gaze back to the skyline, the familiar hum of the city offering no answers. Then, softly, I whispered, "What happens when the parent you lost too early tries to come back? Too late?" The voicemail replayed in my mind, but my heart wasn't sure whether to open the door or close it tighter. I sat still for a long time after hearing it, my father's voice, older, rougher, but unmistakably him. My mug of tea had gone cold. I didn't even realize I hadn't moved until the city outside my window faded from golden dusk to steel-gray night. 25 years without a word, and suddenly he was calling from the shadows of my past like a ghost who missed the funeral. I didn't call back, not that night, not the next morning, either. Instead, I did the only thing that made sense anymore. I turned toward what I could control. The buzz from the essay had slowed. The comment count ticked upward only every few minutes now. A few more messages came in, some from therapists, others from daughters or mothers themselves. Most said the same thing. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." But the noise had dulled. I stepped into my apartment, the same one I had walked into 1,000 times before. But this time, it felt different. The rug under my feet hadn't changed, but I had. I looked around the room and saw evidence of my evolution. A new plant by the window, a framed photo taken recently with my coworkers, and an empty space on the bookshelf where a family picture had once stood. I didn't replace it. That afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, cream-colored envelope, no return address. I knew the script immediately. Dr. Chen, my surgeon. Inside was a small card with embossed roses and 3 short lines in pen. "You were always brave, but now you are whole. Never let anyone convince you otherwise." I ran my fingers over the ink, read it again, then tucked it into the back pocket of my wallet. I didn't need affirmation, but I'd learned to appreciate quiet acknowledgments, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. A few days later, I stood backstage at a local TEDx event, waiting for my cue. The stage manager gave me a nod. I stepped out into the red circle. The lights hit me first. Warm, blinding. The room was full, but I didn't look at the faces. I took a breath and spoke. "We're taught to honor our parents. It's stitched into scripture, taught in classrooms, baked into the moral fabric of how we're raised. But what happens when those we're told to honor forget to honor us in return?" I paused. I was the good daughter, the one who stayed quiet, who sent money, who canceled vacations to make room for doctor's appointments I wasn't invited to, who sat alone in a hospital bed while my mother got a facial. The room was silent. You could have heard a single breath. "Honor," I said slowly, "isn't about hierarchy. It's about mutual respect. And if it's not given both ways, it isn't sacred. It's servitude." My voice caught once. Only once. I let it. Because I wasn't afraid to be human anymore. When I finished, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was something better, sustained, real. That night, my inbox crashed. I closed my laptop, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling. I'd said what I needed to say. That should have been enough. But sometimes, stories don't end with applause. They end with voicemails. I didn't listen to the next one right away. I saw the notification, my mother again, but I didn't touch it. I let it sit in the queue like an unanswered question. A day later, I played it. Her voice was brittle, controlled. "You've made your point. Congratulations. You've destroyed this family for attention. I hope it was worth it." No apology, No awareness. Just one last guilt offering wrapped in bitterness. I didn't delete it. I didn't save it, either. I let it expire. Like all the other messages that had tried to pull me back into a place I had finally outgrown. The next week, I got a text from Celine. I moved to Oregon. I'm not ready to talk. But I'm not mad anymore. I stared at it for a long time before replying. We were both daughters of the same mother. That doesn't mean we were raised the same way. She didn't answer, and that was okay. Healing, I'd learned, isn't a process you finish. It's a practice you choose, over and over again. A few days later, I drove out to a lake on the edge of the city, the same one I used to camp at with my grandmother when I was little. The picnic tables were older now, the trail a little more worn, but the water looked the same, calm and steady. I walked along the shoreline with a paper bag in my hand. Inside were wildflower seeds. I scattered them gently into the earth near the spot we used to pitch our tent. There was no ceremony, just wind and memory. Before I left, I folded a small note and placed it under a flat rock. It said, "You didn't see me then, but I see myself now." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't brace for the echo. I let it go. Sometimes, the deepest scars come not from what was done to us, but from what was never acknowledged. This story isn't just about being left behind after surgery. It's about what happens when silence becomes a family tradition and loyalty is mistaken for obligation. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you were told you owe everything to? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional family stories that speak the truth so many are afraid to say out loud.